wants to get there. Please rise for an invocation by Councilwoman Liz Mealy, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. As we welcome 3 new officers to our force today, it's caused me to reflect a little bit on the things that make this city such a wonderful city to live in, that give us such strength and beauty in our community, the diversity of our community, and the many different projects, the constant sort of intensity of life in the city is a really important part of I think what we all value as we live here in Williamsport. And I know that our public safety forces are always charged with upholding the values of our community and maintaining the peace in our community. And I know that these officers moving forward will work to further strengthen and beautify the city, and that all of us need to constantly concentrate on making the city as welcoming and as diverse a community as we possibly can. Thank you very much.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you for coming out tonight for our regularly scheduled council meeting. The next item on our agenda is approval of city council meeting minutes dated February 2nd, 2017. Can I have a motion and a second to approve those minutes?
So move. Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Any comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank on that approval.
Ms. Mealy.
Yes.
Mr. Noviello.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Dr. Williamson.
Yes, and those items are, the minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no requests for that this evening, so we'll move to the next item. And I'll be jumping around because, of course, we have a number of guests. But the next one is appointments. We have a council appointment to the Board of Health this evening. Ms. Nicole Herr of 139 East 3rd Street. I was the one that recommended to council Ms. Herr for service on the Board of Health, and have had a number of conversations about her interest and qualifications for that, and also encouraged her to talk to Mr. Girardi that interacts with the Board of Health to come well informed. As has become our practice, once her nomination was made, we referred it to committee, in this case to the Public Works Committee, not because it was necessarily a natural fit, but Public Works, I believe, had a conversation with her at their meeting on Tuesday. So I'll refer to Mr. Smith.
Yes, we did. We had on Tuesday the pleasure of interviewing Nicole Herr of 139 East 3rd Street. We had a very delightful interview with her. She has expressed interest in wanting to be on a committee in the city, and especially the Board of Health. She is involved with a local coffee shop. She's had interaction with the Codes Department, the Zoning Department, and she was very enthusiastic about looking forward to be appointed to the Board of Health. It was not a resolution, but we did have a consensus that all 3 of us voted to send it to full council with a positive recommendation to appoint her. And one of the things that we did was after we interviewed her and we felt that she was a qualified candidate. We gave her a copy of the codified ordinances of Williamsport, Part 11, the Public Health Code. So she's already educated and she's able to step up at the first meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion and a second to approve this appointment, please?
So moved. Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Comments or questions, members of council? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank on the appointment?
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Noviello.
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Dr. Williamson.
Yes, and that appointment is approved. Ms. Herr, if you'd like, you can approach the city clerk and we can, I think Mrs. Frank is ready for the swearing in. While you're walking up, one of the things I want to do is, on behalf of council, thank you for your offer of service to the city. As you and I spoke about, I get particularly excited when young people, young professionals in our community are ready and willing to get involved. And thank you again. All right, as I said, I want to jump around a little bit. So the next item on our agenda will be a resolution authorizing the Williamsport Bureau of Police to hire 3 police officers. Mrs. Frank, when you're ready.
Resolution authorizing the Williamsport Bureau of Police to hire 3 officers. Whereas police officer candidate Gino Vincent Cachera, Addison Timothy Gingrich, and Thaddeus Paul Trafford have completed the written testing, background examination, medical examination, psychological testing, and all other required testing in accordance with the requirements set forth by the Williamsport Bureau of Police hiring procedures. Whereas candidates Cachera, Gingrich, and Trafford have completed all the requirements set forth by this department, their employment with the city will commence on Monday, February 20th, 2017. All 3 candidates have already completed the Act 120 program set forth by the Municipal Police Officers Training Commission and will not need to attend any additional training. Be it herefore resolved that the City Council of the City of Williamsport authorizes the Williamsport Bureau of Police to hire the above listed individuals as police officer for the Williamsport Bureau of Police. This hiring is being made in accordance with procedures established by the City of Williamsport's Police Civil Service Board and the Williamsport Bureau of Police.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution?
So moved. Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. How are you this evening?
Very good. Council President Williamson, members of council, Mr. Mayor, administration, I'd like to bring before you this evening a resolution to hire 3 additional officers to the Williamsport Bureau of Police. These candidates have completed all the requirements for employment with the Williamsport Bureau of Police and would begin their official duties on Monday the 20th. At this time, I'd like to introduce them to you all in the public. If I could have Gino Cachera please step forward. Candidate Gino Cachera is 22 years old and lives in South Williamsport, Pennsylvania. He is the son of Mike and Karen Cachera. He is a 2013 graduate of the South Williamsport High School and studied for 1 year at Penn State Altoona campus. Gino Cachera did attend and graduated from the Act 120 program at IUP in May of 2015, and he has also worked for 1 year at the Lycoming County Prison. He will be badge number 25, effective Monday. Could I have candidate Gingrich please step forward? Candidate Addison Timothy Gingrich is 24 years old and lives in Dover, Pennsylvania. He is the son of Beth Fitzpatrick and Timothy Gingrich. Addison is a 2012 graduate of Dover Area High School and did attend Shippensburg University for 2 years. He then attended and graduated the Act 120 program from the Harrisburg Area Community College in 2015 He's currently employed by Fisher Auto Parts in Dillsburg, PA, and will be badge number 34 effective Monday. If I could have candidate Trafford step forward, please. Candidate Thaddeus Paul Trafford is 25 years old and currently lives in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. He is the son of Kelly Fisher and Lance Trafford. Thaddeus is currently married to his wife Ashley, and they have 2 daughters named Arabella and Adelia. Thaddeus is a graduate of the Williamsport area high school, class of 2009. He also attended and graduated the Act 120 program in 2016 from the Lackawanna Police Academy. He is currently employed with FedEx, and he will be badge number 37 effective Monday.
Thank you very much. Do I have comments or questions from members of council? Mr. Smith.
We want to thank you gentlemen for stepping up and becoming employees of the Williamsport Bureau of Police. We have a very fine police department. We have a lot of young men and women that are currently employed in WBP. So we're very thankful that you have stepped up and wanted to become a member of our great police department. I only have, I guess, maybe one thing that I would want to say. I'm looking in the audience and I see family, I see children, I see parents, I see grandparents. Being a police officer can sometimes be very stressful. I would just ask you to always keep your family in mind and remember they're the most important thing in your life. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Mr. Novial.
I'm just kind of happy to see that we live in a community that has the types of families that can bring candidates of this caliber before us. It's nice to see that we've got 3 brand-new candidates here that are going to help us fill some spots that we've needed filled for a time here now. I'm grateful that they're able to step forward and that they've been brought to us by families that understand what it is to be family and what it is to be community-minded and community-oriented. So I'm grateful for that, certainly first and foremost. I'm sure it's not my own age, but I'm very happy to see that we have the kind of youth that we have. And it seemed to me when I was younger, police officers seemed so much older than these fellows. But I'm glad to have them, and I'm hoping that that youth suggests that we'll have them for quite some time. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Allison.
I'd like to welcome you as well, and you look like police officers just standing there. But
It's all
as
about how they
councilman,
hold their hands.
Pardon me?
It's about how they hold their hands, I think.
Yeah, they just have such
Got
good
it, got
posture,
it.
and they just look authoritative. But as Councilman Smith mentioned, we have a young police department, and decidedly, I think the majority is probably now, a decided majority is 5 years or less experience, and a lot of new ones. So it's a young, you're going to see people your generation and your age, which is good because you're the future of our police department. You're the future of the generation is going to be the future of the city. And as you grow, the city is going to be growing. And hopefully it's going to look more like you are, because there's a transition going on in this country as generations move. And if we're going to be a vital, viable community, we need to attract people like you and your age and that want to work here, some that will live here. So, you know, I'm excited about that. I'd also like to commend our police department for it's a quick turnaround, it seems now. We have retirements, but they're working hard to bring good qualified people in and keep us up to the complement that we've budgeted to work at. Because if we have a full complement of officers, it makes everybody's job, I won't say easier, because being a police officer is never easier, but it makes it, I think, work more efficiently, I would say. So all around, it's it's a pleasure tonight to welcome you aboard, and it's a pleasure to see our police department and the transition that's taking place there. You're part of something that we think is going to be very special in our community, and we're glad to have you aboard. Thank you.
Mrs. Katz.
We just want to welcome you to our family and your family also. And we want to thank you tremendously for the job you're about to embark on. And keep safe.
Others? Ms. Mealy?
And of course, as we always say, gentlemen, if there's ever anything that we as city council can help you with, we assume that we won't often be a resort, but we're happy to help as well.
And to add my sentiments as well, you know, there is a feeling in our culture today of skepticism for police officers. You will not find that behind this bench here. And so we are supporting you, and if we can help you in any way, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you very much.
And as a last voice, let me also add my welcome and my thanks for your willingness to serve our city. One of my predecessors in this seat always used to emphasize the role of the police in the city as protectors and servers. People who protect and serve is the mission of our police department. And those are important and balanced duties that you take on. And I think, as others said, it is a great time, really, to be joining the force. We have really good leadership in place who've got their hands full, getting an inexperienced but energetic is the positive side of that equation, young force to leverage the maximum amount of their abilities to protect and to serve our city. And so I'd also join in and say, whatever we can do as partners in this relationship to help you protect and to serve, please let us know. So thanks again. If there are no other comments or questions, Mrs. Frank, on the resolution, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and that resolution is approved, and congratulations.
Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of this Commonwealth and the Constitution of the United States, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Welcome.
I think we're probably related somewhere down the line.
Welcome.
Probably less.
Get on board.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for coming on board. Keep us safe and yourself. Just
Yeah, sure. Do you want us coming in? Oh,
Come on over, Don. They're gonna have a hard time getting that one thing.
Isn't this a handsome bunch?
well, they are. Well, not you, so they got good barbers. I'll go ahead and do this one then. While I have you up there, I think we'll then move on to resolution related to SRT mutual aid resolution, please. Mrs. Frank?
SRT Mutual Aid Resolution. Agreement between the City of Williamsport Bureau of Police, SRT, and the Columbia Montour Police SWAT Team. Be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Williamsport that the agreement attached hereto with the City of Williamsport Bureau of Police, SRT, and the Columbia Montour Police SWAT Team to enter into a mutual aid agreement for the purposes of providing special response team, special weapons and tactics team to the requesting municipality at the request of any participating member.
Thank
The
you.
at- oh.
I'm sorry. Thank you. May I have a motion and a second?
So move.
Second.
Perry, motion and a second. Good evening.
Okay, good evening. President Williamson, members of council, Mr. Mayor, members of the city administration. What the police department brings to you tonight is a resolution in reference to our SRT team, our special response team. It's basically a mutual aid agreement between our SRT team and the Columbia Montour SWAT team. The purpose of it is to make sure that we are operationally ready in times of need, when we have big events or anything else, so that we can be prepared and be ready if something happens and we need additional resources or manpower that we may not currently have. So what I would like to do is, if you have any questions, open up the questions to Officer Brown.
And this item was reviewed by the Public Works Committee?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Smith, please.
Due to a request of time, it was brought to the Public Works Committee rather than the Public Safety Committee, which would be the normal committee for it to come to. However, there are dual members of both committees. We did go over this, and it was pointed out by Captain Mays. It is a mutual aid agreement. We have mutual aid agreements with other boroughs and townships throughout the area. And what it actually does, it's a memorandum of understanding which defines what their responsibilities are if they would come into our community, defines our responsibilities if we would go into their community, and the responsibilities that they would be together on a particular operation. There are other communities also involved in this. Mahoning Township Police Department, Millville Police Department, Montour Township, Scott Township Police Department, and South Center Township. So there are quite a few, and one of the things that Council and Public Safety and Public Works Committees are looking at for the future is regionalizing in some areas. It can be a large benefit to all of the parties involved. especially when we're looking at dollars for grant projects, and being able to acquire those dollars is easier when there are a number of entities that are involved in it. The memorandum does point out, as I said, how high-risk situations will be dealt with, how equipment is to be dealt with, how the pay is to be dealt with on a particular operation. We did vote with a positive recommendation to council with a condition on this, that when we received it, it was actually dated August of 2016, and due to the fact that we can't backdate something, that was changed to February 17th of 2017. So having had that approved, the Public Works Committee is sending it to full council with a positive recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions from members of council? Mr. Noviello.
Just to sort of reinforce some of that, I think what we're looking at here, at least in my estimation, is a little bit of a good neighbor kind of policy thing, where we're, extending our hands across the distances to make connections that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be made. I do agree with Mr. Smith that in my mind it's a form or degree of regionalization without all the muss and fuss associated with what we might expect to see. So I can always appreciate the fact that we get something like this accomplished in the least bureaucratic kind of a way. So this is another opportunity for us to extend ourselves as a good neighbor and to be able to rely on other communities when we are in certain type of needs as well. So I commend our officers for stepping up to the plate and making this happen for us, and obviously it's going to be a good thing for the future as we go down the line. So thank you both again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Miller.
Just because I don't sit on the Public Works Committee, what existing mutual aid agreements does the police department have? Do we have anything in place right now?
We have mutual aid agreements with our neighboring communities, South Williamsport, Old Lycoming, other municipalities. This is really no different than any of that. This just specifically defines for the purpose of specialized tactical teams.
So we wouldn't be using any other forces in this agreement, but we do promise all that mutual aid to any of our surrounding municipalities. Okay. And how often do we put the current mutual aid agreements into effect?
That'll vary. At any time, depending on the incidents, we may be asked or requested to assist, whether it's state police, Southside, Old Lycoming. If they have an incident going on and they need assistance, we go.
Okay.
If we have issues here in the city and we need their help, they come.
Okay.
So.
And so far, I've never heard of any issues with any of the current, but excellent. Well, yeah, I think the more we can, clearly, I think as we're seeing, the more we can regionalize, whether it's with our transit systems, with our police forces, with recreation would be lovely as well. The better we can utilize all the resources that are available out there, and it's a wise idea. So thank you, gentlemen. This is an exciting thing to see come before us.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Mr. Allison.
Just so I understand, because I wasn't in the meeting either. I counted 12 other police departments here. So those 12 make up the Columbia Montour Police SWAT team.
Correct.
So in essence, we're dealing with one other entity, the group that makes up the SWAT team.
Correct.
Rather than 12 individual municipalities.
Correct. That's my understanding as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all.
Okay. Ms. Mealy?
To ask a follow-up question on Randy's question, have we ever looked into establishing that sort of entity within Lycoming County?
So far, I don't think there's really been that type of a need for the incidents, the day-to-day type incidents that we have. We're able to get adequate resources when necessary. Where this comes into play and where this is really beneficial for both parties is that obviously the city of Williamsport hosts several major events a year where we have thousands of people that come to our community. And it's our responsibility to try to provide safety and security to those people during those events. We do have resources here, but obviously we have limited resources here. So when we have large-scale incidents, this just puts another tool in our belt that we can request assistance from officers that are within our region that has specialty training, skills, and equipment to better aid us, prepare, and plan in the event that something would unfortunately go wrong at one of our major events. It's building relationships, and it's something that we want to expand on from here. This is hopefully the start of even more and better relationships with our partners within this region so that we can provide the absolute best service we can for this city.
Excellent. Yeah, no, as I said, I think everything about the agreement is excellent. I guess my question is merely whether at some point in the future, that's something that we should look toward trying to accomplish in Lycoming County, an entity that sort of represents the public safety forces that we can marshal throughout the county, not just in the city, so that they can be making a deal with our regional force instead of making a deal with individual departments one by one. But.
Mr. Allison.
I have a follow-up question. Are there going to be any combined training events to get to know each other as a?
Yes, we were actually planning an exercise in April that will be conducted here in the city of Williamsport. They have been requested to come and participate and train with us, so we can go over different logistical things, including communications, chain of command, different operational type things. So yes, that's already in the works, that's already planned, and that will be happening in April.
Okay, great. I figured as much, but I just.
Any other comments or questions? Let me just add, I think cooperation across municipalities in formal and informal ways is the only way we are going to be able to proceed in Pennsylvania in the future. And so every connection and relationship that any department can build across those lines is something I think we all look forward to. So I want to thank the gentleman involved in putting this together. I appreciate the work that you've done here. If there are no other comments or questions, Mrs. Frank, on the resolution, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is approved. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda then, I believe we'll move down to the items related to certificates of appropriateness and demolition if Mr. Girardi thinks it's appropriate, i.e. he has guests here for us? Yes. Okay, great. So first we'll move the certificate of appropriateness for 341 Market Street. How are you this evening?
Good. Good evening, President Williamson, members of council. What you have before you is a certificate of appropriateness request to remove two portions of a front wall and install two roll-up doors. Also, I have attached sketches showing the pictures and colors of what it's going to look like, and there is a sketch showing the overall project, what it's going to look like. If you want, I can go through it. It's a little confusing, but I'd be more than happy to try to explain it to you. You look at the two photos that you have, that is the building there's a main entrance door in the center. On the left-hand side, there's large windows, and on the right-hand side, there's large windows. What they're intending to do is bring down the soft to make it so it's all level across the top. There are going to be two rolled-down aluminum anodized doors. They'll be baked on enamel to the colors that you see in the picture. In the center of it, there will be the picture showing this says the bar. Okay, the place will be called now the Bar on Market. Okay, and the colors are as they are. The roll-down doors are not going all the way down to the first floor. What they're going to do is they're probably going to have a little build-up area of about 2-3 feet so that people can't go in and out. They have to go through the main door instead of stepping through anywhere in the building. So that's the only thing that's a little bit different on the drawing. And we do have a representative here if you have any questions of him or myself.
Okay, great, thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the certificate of appropriateness?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Comments or questions from members of council? Ms. Mealy?
Okay, so it looks as though, I'm assuming the doors are similar to what we've already seen on the Moon and Raven. I think we approved a certificate of appropriateness for the roll-down
Yes,
windows at the
very
Moon
similar,
and Raven. And
identical to what you saw. at the
And
Moon
I'm
Raven.
assuming the similar structure, it seems to me they've got about a 3-foot
Yes.
threshold there. And you said the soffit's dropping down so that it's an equal level all the way across.
That's correct.
A little bit unlike what's shown in the image, which I'm assuming is just a computer mock-up.
Right, if you look on the picture, it looks a little different, but it will be a
Yeah.
level all the way across.
Got it. And then we're getting rid of that secondary door as well, correct?
Yes, I believe so. You just have- That, you're talking right here.
You talking the man door in the center?
Yeah.
Well, there's the door that's always been the entrance for the establishment.
Oh, actually, there's only one door there. The other one's still a window, the secondary one.
Oh,
That's
okay.
not- yeah,
So
that's
it's
fixed.
not actually,
So,
but so,
yeah, it's actually-
but so that entire facade, that entire chunk of the facade will be one roll-down garage door. The other entire window section will be a roll-down garage door effectively, and then the one entrance door.
Correct.
That seems like it'll be an improvement. Is the structure, is the remainder of the structure seeing any adaptation, or?
What he has done is he has applied for a permit. They're presently inside doing renovations. If you've ever been into the establishment, there's a long
Oh,
barren wall.
never, Joe.
I've never been there myself. I've been to the facility, but-
I have.
There's a long bearing wall that runs down through the center. They're in the process right now. It's actually removed. There's a steel beam in its place, so it'll be wide open now. So they're doing a lot of interior renovations to the
okay.
facility.
Well, that building hasn't seen heavy renovation, I think, in quite a long time. It's seen a lot of painting and a lot of minor modification, but it sounds like it might be a positive thing. But other than the interior, I guess, I mean, at some point, we had seen a permit to paint the whole exterior of the building, and that never actually came to pass, which I think all of us probably feel was maybe a positive thing. But that we're not talking about painting the exterior, we're not talking about any current exterior modifications aside from the ones
As
that are
far as
being
this
taught on here.
application is, it's for what you see on the drawings down to the ground, from probably the bottom of the second floor, top of the first floor ceiling, down to the ground, and the front will be what they're working on.
Got it.
And if they do decide to do something different, then they'll, of course, come back through for the approval.
Sure. Yeah, and I was going to say, if I can ask of the applicant, are there intentions for the remainder of the structure at some point?
Not at
or-
this time.
Okay. Are you, well, is and maybe this isn't really part of our purview, but is the new bar also the owner of the entire building, or is it a
at
different?
this time.
Okay, all right. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Katz?
This came to us quite a while ago, right, about 2 years ago, wasn't it? Where they modified the top, didn't they? On the second floor and the roof? Didn't
The
they
roof
do-
line.
Wasn't
There was
yes.
a, yes, if you remember correctly, there was an old metal awning way up there that was
Right.
leaning, and the wall was leaning forward. They removed that awning and dropped down the brick on that. You're correct.
So it was that's all finished and
Yes.
so that doesn't need to be touched at all anymore?
Nope, that's all been
So
fixed.
That's why I
and
wanted to
correct.
clarify that. I never knew if that was finished,
Yep,
because I couldn't tell from the outside if it was.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's all tied back again, and it was brought back down and relayed, so. Yep.
And the place is huge. You have a lot of work ahead of you. But lots of luck and welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you. I'm glad to be downtown, for sure.
Glad to have you.
Absolutely. Other comments or questions? We are happy to have another establishment downtown and look forward to enjoying it for all the citizens who go to, I don't know, what kind of place is the bar?
What kind of place it will be?
That was a joke.
will be.
I'm sorry.
You know, my family has a long line of pool shooters, so we're
Yeah.
definitely going to have some pool league in there, cleaning the place up, you know, making it welcoming from outside, inside, and just a real nice place to come and relax.
I made a bad joke, but in all earnestness, I do like to make an opportunity for new businesses to have a little bit of advertising when they come in for these approvals. So do you have a time frame for opening?
Looking at April 1st, probably.
Okay.
We were pushing for maybe a soft opening for St. Patty's Day, but,
Okay.
yeah.
That's great. So
Very
people
well.
will look forward to that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Ms. Frank, on the certificate, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the certificate is approved. Next item on the agenda is demolition for 1019 Mead Street.
The first of the two demolitions, this is for Mr. Tom Stutzman. He owns a structure located at 1019 Mead Street, which is located in an R2 zoning district. It is a single-family dwelling. It was damaged and destroyed by fire. He's requesting this building to be removed. He has applied for a permit to construct a new dwelling on that property. And as soon as you get your approval, I think he's very anxious to tear it down and start building his building. And we do have a representative here if you have any questions of him.
Okay, can I have a motion and a second on the demolition, please?
So moved. Second.
Hearing motion and a second, comments or questions? Mr. Smith?
Mr. Girardi, is this a case where this house can't be repaired from the fire damage?
It's from my understanding, I'm not sure if it can be repaired or not. I was not the inspector who went in the facility. I don't know if Chief Heckman has any more input than I do. I do know that the windows are all boarded up. It does look like it was a pretty badly damaged structure. Mr. Stutz might be able to answer that better than myself.
Yeah, we probably only have about like a half a door, anything like 4 foot up got burnt, so, you know, if you want to look at the bottom of the house, the floors, it's all right, but anything up high, it burnt right across, and they said it cost more to.
The insurance coverage didn't cover repairs?
Okay.
Your insurance coverage, it didn't cover repairing the property?
Well, it only recovered, it's only going to pay so much. I have to pay extra to, what I'm having built. It would cost more to.
Did the fire go through the roof?
Yeah, it went up. It started in the back and went up through the roof in the back and all through the upstairs.
What you're looking at is the front of the building. I did not take any pictures of the rear of the property, and I think if you'd have saw the rear of the property, you would understand that it is pretty bad.
Everybody thinks it was a kitchen fire until they went inside. And that's when you see all the damage. The fire went right from the first floor all the way out onto the porch, but it didn't hit the outside, only in the back. Now the whole back's more or less burned up. You know, you might have half a house, but the rest, excuse me, the rest of the house is pretty well burnt.
So you didn't have insurance coverage for replacement?
Yes, yes. I'm having a Cape Cod house put in there for my wife as a downstairs. If she was upstairs at the time of that fire, she would have been dead. So I'm having a piece built on, I got permission from code, for her to have a bedroom, or myself, to have a bedroom downstairs, because she was lucky she was standing in the kitchen when that fire started, because if either one of us was upstairs or anything, she wouldn't be with us.
What was the cause of the fire?
Well, it was under investigation. A fire marshal and the adjuster said that the people that put the dryer in didn't put a clamp in the back of the dryer where that hose goes. You plug in the 220 plug. They put it in, didn't put the clamp on there, and it's been rubbing on there, and it cut it, and it's been arcing. The dryer wasn't even on. My wife did a blanket the night before. She opened the door, put a load of wash in, and she went to the door for something and come back and saw it smoking. Next thing you know, it hit the blanket and just went right up. The house was, I think, made in like 1922. It was my homestead. I sure didn't want to tear it down because I lived there since 1952, and until I got married a couple of years and I bought the house back. I didn't really want to tear it down, but with the water damage from the hose, the floors were all buckling. It just probably would have cost more than what it's going to cost me to what I'm putting up now. I'm not no contractor.
Okay, thank you very much. The one comment that I'd like to make is each month we get a codes inspection report and a report from the fire department on their activities for that month. And of course, we all know that rental properties are subject to inspection. And that's why I ask you what the cause of the fire was, because many times there are fire hazards that are in single-family dwellings that are owner-occupied, and those things are never caught. And I just want to say that for the public, that codes in the fire department will come out and do an inspection. Yes, there's a fee for that, but folks that live in single-family dwellings, at some point, really, every so many years, I would recommend you have a codes and fire inspection of that property. There are things that are out there, perhaps that could have been caught on an inspection. It's possible. Those are things we don't know. And obviously, we don't require that of single-family dwellings that are owner-occupied. So that's just something to think about for the future, because our codes department will come out. As I pointed out, there's a fee for it, but that small fee might save having to come here and ask for a demolition of a property that you've lived in for, what, 60 years or more. Those are just things that, in some cases, could be very helpful in avoiding such things. Thank you for your information.
Other comments or questions, Mrs. Katz?
I just want to say I'm sorry for your loss, because this looked like it was a beautiful home.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for you. But I'm glad you're going to have something there on the property at least.
Mr. Novio?
Tom, did you say 52?
Well,
1952?
151.
Yeah.
And I lived around the corner on Sheridan and Sherman in 52. They bought the house.
Just kind of wanted to rub that in a little bit. That's all.
Oh, yeah. He's older than I am.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Allison?
And I've known we're the exact same age, so, but he's been a East End, his family's an East End fixture for all those years, and it's heartwarming to know that he can stay there, rebuild, and wants to stay in town and where his roots are. So, good luck, Tom.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, on the approval of the demolition.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the demolition is approved. Next item on the agenda is demolition for 604 Walnut Street.
Yes, the last request I have in front of you is a demolition request for Susquehanna Health. Was it UPMC, I believe now? I'm sorry, I should be putting that down. For the structure located at 604 Walnut Street. It's located in an R3 residential district. The structure was used as a commercial facility on the first floor, which is retail sales, and a second floor apartment. It is currently vacant. The owner of the property will need to plant seeds after the building is demolished and install it so we have grass on the property. And if you have any questions of me or we do have a representative here from the hospital.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the demolition?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing motion and a second. Comments or questions? Mr. Smith?
Mr. Girardi, this is in the hospital zone, correct?
This is in an R3 zone. It's not in the institutional district. No.
It's not.
It's not in the hospital zone. No. It's in the little area going down. I'm going to believe it's the gateway. Am I correct, Mr.? Right.
So is this,
Pathway to health zone that was identified.
is this part of the pilot program? It is. Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Ms. Mealy?
I believe that the zone's actually currently in R3, correct? But
That's
we're
correct.
working on a rezoning to RU. When do we anticipate that?
I know they are in the process of doing, I'll let Mr. Grado speak better on that than myself.
Yeah, we've gone through the administrative process and given it to the county, got comments. The next item on the agenda, which is really part of the master plan, we'll probably address that, and we can decide whether we're going to proceed with the RU zone, or we may be going through the master planning process first. We did agree to it as part of the agreement of the pilot agreement with Susquehanna Health, that would be, we would support the RU zone within that pathway. That's the area from Bannister Place to Spruce Street, and from Little League Boulevard to Park Avenue, which is the zone.
Just to follow up on that, John, you say that, so basically all the paperwork on our end's completed, the county has reviewed it, and it would basically come before us for a vote before it became a
Yeah,
final zoning change?
if working with the health system, if it was decided that we wanted to amend the zoning map, we would still need to do the public hearing process and take it to the city planning commission and then to city council, but we could do the map amendment if we so chose to.
Okay, and just to ask for a little bit of a preview here, county's comments, did county feel that we should wait if we were doing if we were attempting a master plan in the area, or did county feel that we could move ahead with a single zoning initiative and then?
Yeah, well, when we got the county comments, we weren't entertaining the master planning process.
Okay.
But their comments indicated it was generally consistent with what we wanted to do, naming that as an RU zone. So that's something that's consistent with what was in the MOU.
I guess my gut reaction would be that perhaps we'd be wise to move forward with just the RU designation, but, you know, but I think, right, we'll need to have greater discussions about that, but I would be curious, I guess, to see what could happen in that neighborhood with a simple zoning designation there, and then use that as we're looking at a larger plan. But it depends a little bit, I think, on the timing we wind up looking at for the larger plan, which we'll talk about next, so.
Right.
One thing I'd like to add to that specific point, I think part of the discussion after we started the process of rezoning that specific area towards RU, the concept and the discussions between council and the city and I'm struggling to always say the right thing now too, UPMC. Was, hey, let's maybe consider that as a piece of a larger discussion, i.e. the master planning process that we'll be talking about. And so then the question becomes, does it make sense to zone one small piece and then come back and potentially, we don't even know, rezone a larger piece, or would it make sense to make sure all of those things are fitting together? In my mind, it's almost the parallel that we went through when council said, hey, let's do a traffic study on the east side of downtown before we had a plan that the traffic study would respond to. In this case, it may be that we want a master plan in place that a comprehensive zoning map change for the whole area might work against. We're kind of far down the path here, and so I don't know, maybe we do go forward if there's no real cost in doing two separate steps. But then again, if it doesn't hurt to slow down, we might want to do it as one overall package. So we should have those conversations offline and then make it an overall decision. I think it'll be easy enough for us all to agree which path to follow. Other comments on this request for demolition? Mrs. Frank, when she gets the microphone back, you can proceed, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Nuviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and that demolition is approved. Thank you very much. That brings us, I think, finally, if I've counted all our various guests here correctly, to return to the top of the agenda. So the next item on the agenda will be a presentation from Penn Strategies as part of their more or less regularly scheduled, but regular quarterly presentation. Mr. Fitzgerald, how are you this evening?
Good, thank you, Dr. President, Mr. Vice President, members of council, Mayor Campana, administration. Wanted to use the opportunity of our quarterly report to discuss a new scope of services for Penn Strategies for the coming year. In addition to working on grant projects on an ongoing basis. At the request of the administration and council, we wanted to specify, a scope of work so that we can, have an understanding of what city council administration are looking for and update you all on a regular basis on our progress. So I did provide to all the members of council and to administration, to the administration. Mayor, did you end up getting a folder? No, I think it's right. Oh, okay. Well, I meant to sit one there for you. So you do, when you're done with this one, I'll give you this one. Okay. So in the folder, I included two things. Number one is the scope of service document, which is on the right, and then on the left are some biographies of our leadership team. Of course, you know Phil and I, but just wanted to include some information about some of our other team members, so that you're aware of that. So let's just go through, if we could, the scope of work for 2017 and outline the activities that Penn Strategies will be focused on in the coming year. And these are not necessarily in order of importance. They're just all thrown together there. One of the major projects that we're working on is the coordination of the efforts between the City of Williamsport and the Williamsport Municipal Water Authority. Phil Torometer from Penn Strategies has been working very closely with Councilman Skip Smith and Councilwoman Bonnie Katz, as well as the administration, to clearly define all of the tasks that will be associated potentially with this new stormwater utility, which would be controlled by the Williamsport Municipal Water and Sanitary Authority. We are monitoring the progress of the Stormwater Advisory Committee, which Councilwoman Katz serves as the representative for City Council on that Stakeholder Advisory Committee, which includes various stakeholders from throughout the city, has representations from the Williamsport School District, representatives from the Williamsport School District, Penn College, the hospital, UPMC Susquehanna, and others. So the goal obviously was to get a wide range of folks on there, to be able to give their input related to the potential creation of a new utility. Williamsport is really leading the way, along with the Williamsport Municipal Water Authority on these efforts, which will be held in very high regard, when it comes time to file grant applications. On that same front, we are working on, with the Public Safety Committee and Councilman Skip Smith, on drafting an MOU, which potentially would transfer stormwater responsibilities from the City of Williamsport to the Williamsport Municipal Water and Sanitary Authority. Additionally, we are working on, at the same time, drafting an MOU with this, that would be a memorandum of understanding between the City of Williamsport, Loyalsock Township, and Old Lycoming Township, in which we would codify responsibility for any future expenditures that may be incurred as a result of levy recertification, et cetera. In the past, we've always had handshake agreements, and they've worked out pretty well, but in the future, we wanted to make sure that every municipality pays for the use of the levy system, proportional to the amount of protection that they receive from that system. That's important for two reasons. Obviously, one, if there are any expenses that come up, it's important for that reason, but also to demonstrate to potential funding agencies, in the federal government, state government, and also at the county, that we are unified in this effort. And then finally, as we list there, we will be working with the county and Williamsport Municipal Water Authority officials or whomever, after we end up, making some determinations as how to move forward here. We will be pursuing and helping to secure funding for anything that comes up there. On the next item, coordinating efforts between the City of Williamsport and key stakeholders associated with the Park Avenue project. We will, and for each one of these, just for the purposes of, clarity and also, to make sure that we're doing, what we need to be doing, I have listed leads. That doesn't mean that, other members of council can't be involved, other members of the administration can't be involved, but on these particular projects, those are the individuals who are the point of contact. So on that area, obviously, Council President Williamson, Councilman Allison, the mayor, as far as the administration, obviously working directly with the mayor and the community development department there. And we will be serving as a liaison between the Williamsport Economic Revitalization Committee, which Councilman Allison is the chair of, and UPMC Susquehanna, as well as, helping with the selection. We talked earlier about the master plan for this area. We'll be helping to produce the RFP and help with the selection of whomever the consultant will be who ultimately will study that area. And then finally, coordinate efforts between the county, state, and federal officials to identify and secure any funding for potential projects in that development zone when that becomes appropriate. On the East 3rd Street project, we'll be working directly with Mayor Campana and River Valley Transit, and the City Council lead on that project is Councilman Allison. We'll be serving as the liaison between Lycoming College and the City of Williamsport as needed. Additionally, we will lead the creation of a committee to review and advance changes suggested in the traffic study. And also, obviously, out of that traffic study, there have been some issues that have been addressed that we will need the assistance of PennDOT for, and so we will be working, with the Commonwealth to try and expedite any requested changes that are needed there. And as always, trying to help find funding, and not only typical state funding, but anything that may become available through President Trump's new infrastructure plan, if and when that's announced, and some more details, are coming out on that. The next project is the Brodart neighborhood improvement, obviously a very important project in the city. Be working directly with the mayor and the community development team on that, and again, Councilman Williamson and Councilman Allison as the leads there. We'll be working particularly with county staff to identify potential state funding to expand market rate housing. Obviously, one of the things that area needs, and one of the things that our city needs, is more residents. And there are programs available, and the county has done a good job of working in conjunction with the city to pursue funding for some things that have happened there now. Want to continue to work with the city to improve that very important neighborhood. And also a couple of things that we listed there. We're going to be working closely with Lycoming Engines to enhance the outside of their facility. They've already made some significant improvements there to make it look nicer, and also working with the Pajama Factory. And in addition to our regular work on state funding, we will be looking at possible HUD, Housing and Urban Development grant programs as well. On to the next item, recreation. I'll be working with a bunch of people in the administration on that, as it covers a wide variety of areas. Obviously working with Mayor Campana, the Finance Department, Recreation Department, and Public Works Department. Obviously the city was able to secure the Bowman Field RCAP. We'll be working closely with Mr. Nichols and RVT to determine what the best process would be as far as making sure that those that the RCAP grant dollars are, that we're actually, able to get the reimbursement. There's a good deal of paperwork and other things that, that are related specifically to, making sure that we're in compliance with the grant and that we get the money. So be working with RVT to do that. Also, going to be working with city officials to determine the best use of Elm Park. There are some options that are becoming available there, and we'll be talking more about those in the future. Again, always looking to try and find additional grant sources. There have been some great advances made with regards to recreation in the city of Williamsport, and we'd like to be able to continue to work on that. One of the things that's listed there is to review the current committee structure within the Recreation Department and look at the cost and benefits that may be associated with streamlining that process. In a number of municipalities throughout the Commonwealth, the recreation committees or recreation authorities, are much more streamlined, so that there's an overall approach to recreation as opposed to, just focusing on one particular area. So again, no decisions have been made there, obviously, but just our job is to provide information to the administration and to council so that, we can, you all can make the right decisions. The next item is the City Hall Public Safety Building. And obviously working with the mayor, Public Works, Public Safety, Councilman Williamson, Councilwoman Mealy, and Councilman Smith. And that item is a pretty easy one. We'll be assisting with the formation of a stakeholder committee, which will look into the cost and benefits associated, with an additional, facility for law enforcement, and also, potentially even looking at, as a cost-saving effort, moving, City Hall to a newer, different facility, if that would be cost prohibitive. The next item is the 2020 census. This is a very important issue, as we find out very frequently when we're trying to pursue grant fundings. It's important to make sure that everybody's counted. And, if everybody's not counted, that puts us in different categories, relating to being able to get federal and state fundings. It used to, the last count, we were just below 30,000. 30,000, although not as important of a number as it used to be with a number of state agencies, the 30,000 was the cutoff for a number of programs. And since we fell just below that in our formal count, that sort of put us at a bit of a disadvantage from time to time. So we are going to be working with the county and census officials to make sure that every resident is counted. Even though there may be some who don't want to be counted, we need to make sure that everybody's counted. And part of that will be developing a plan to really inform the public about how an undercount will very negatively impact the city of Williamsport. It's important that every person who lives here is counted. On to the next item, economic revitalization initiatives. Mayor, I received a note from you here, so I'll mention that during this portion. Obviously, we'll be working with Mayor Campana, Community Development Department, and the City Council lead on this will be Councilman Allison, as he chairs the Economic Revitalization Committee, and the mayor had given me a note here related to STEM, which is science, technology, education, and mathematics. So, obviously, any ideas that are related to that, this would be the area that we would bring those up. But one of the unique ideas that some members of council and the administration came up with is, on a regular basis, using the Economic Revitalization Committee, the ERC, as an opportunity to look at places where the city can be helpful in ways other than just grant money. Looking at smaller development sites as opposed to, some of the larger projects that we've undertaken in the past. For example, a lot of us drive by the Discovery Building and see that that's empty. The head-to-toe building, the former Williamsport Foundry site, the Hoyers Building. Just working with local realtors, local business folks, and coming up with some unique ideas on those. One of the things that we've found, through our work here in Williamsport and also in other areas, a lot of times the best ideas come from the citizens. They don't necessarily come from the experts or the planners. And so, really just trying to serve, in conjunction with the ERC to reach out and see if we can come up with some good development ideas. And even if it's, simple things that can be done for the city, or even if it's, somebody in the community knows of an interest of somebody to develop somewhere in the county, and, we can put them in touch with, realtors who maybe, for example, are developing the head-to-toe building or whatever, introducing them to potential tenants. So things that the city can do that don't necessarily cost money to the taxpayers, but can have a huge benefit to the taxpayers if we fill these sites. So I'm very excited, particularly about that initiative. Even though I may not seem overly excited tonight, I'm a little under the weather. I am very excited about this. And so STEM, the mayor's talking about STEM there, science, technology, education, and mathematics. Those are the kind of jobs for the future. that we certainly need to focus on because, with the relationship with Penn College and others, those jobs tend to be, slightly higher paying than the other areas, and are very important. Also, with regards to the economic revitalization initiatives, whenever citizens have ideas, I think that it's important that they bring them to the administration or to city council. So if there's anything that all of you, want us to look into in particular, we would be more than happy to do that and look at, things that have been done in other areas and how they've worked there. And finally, to make sure that we do everything that we say we're going to do here, we will on a monthly basis. We had tried weekly reports, but they had kind of seemed repetitive in some cases when we were working on on the same project, trying to advance the same project week after week. So we decided that probably a monthly written report, which I will, just for the sake of simplicity, give to Janice and then also, Mayor, to your office so that you can distribute to the administration as opposed to them just coming in emails from me. I will give them to the appropriate people, and then they can get them out. It'll be a written report that you'll have on our monthly activities. Like the first week, for example, for February, the first week of March, we'll report on our February activities, and then we will do our quarterly reports, obviously on a quarterly basis, or any time that we're asked to by the council or administration. So I know sort of lengthy, but it's been a little while since we've talked. So this is our proposed scope of service. If anybody has any questions, comments, we'd be happy to adjust it or keep it as is and begin the work.
Great, thank you very much. Does anybody like to comment? One of the things I think is putting the scope of work on your intended activities, given all the work that you've been doing with the administration and with council. I think it's a good to put on paper, in some ways, really, it's more than a laundry list, but a laundry list of the agenda that we have before us, at least those that we've engaged with your help on. And so you put it on paper and it's a pretty substantial agenda that we have before us. Any comments, Mr. Smith?
You had mentioned in your presentation concerning the MOU that we have been working with Old Lycoming and Loyalsock Township. And I know Mr. Lubin has had that paperwork now, and we really need that a ruling on that very soon so that we can move forward with the meeting. I know that Old Lycoming Township has contacted Penn Strategies and asked for a meeting on this, so I'd like to get that MOU back as soon as possible with your ruling on that. Also, in regards to that, with the Graffius Run project, Mr. Lubin, if you have time, we'd certainly like to get a written response back on that RFP question that we have, because we can't have a meeting with the WMSA until we get a ruling back on that, which will give us the capability to then move forward with Graffius Run, because we've all been very interested in how we're going to handle that. And your response on that will play an important part when we meet with WMSA on that project. So we are awaiting that, and hopefully we'll receive that soon so we can continue to move forward. As Dr. Williamson pointed out, that certainly is a lengthy laundry list that we've got. Sometimes it gives us a headache when we look at all these projects we've got going. But there's a lot of things that council is involved in right now. All the committees on council are very heavily involved in a lot of numerous projects, and we're all working diligently to try to make the city move forward. So we appreciate the work that you've been doing, and I know I worked closely with Mr. Trumetter on setting these meetings up and so forth. He's been a big help in doing that, because with all the projects we have on our plate, it'd be pretty tough without his help in putting a lot of this together, so we do appreciate that.
Thank you. And we really appreciate working, with the administration and with the members of council. I mean, we have a very good working relationship, and that makes our job a lot easier. Obviously, there are many reasons why the city of Williamsport is, and I can say this in a public meeting, is my favorite account because I live here. And it was also, the city of Williamsport was also the first city who took a chance in hiring Penn Strategies. And so now as we're continuing to grow, the work that we do here in conjunction with all of you is very important to me and to us. But I can tell you that in dealing with municipalities throughout the Commonwealth, we really do have, the city really does have its act together, and a tremendous amount of opportunities in front of us. And I really think this is going to be a very good year for the city. And, a lot of things have been done, to lay the foundation that we're on now. And Williamsport really is a city that's on the move and is moving in the right direction. I mean, when you look at third-class cities throughout Pennsylvania, the story isn't always as bright as ours. And I mean, even though we do have challenges that are very serious, they're not as bad as some of the other cities. We're not in, Act 47 distress status or on the verge of bankruptcy. Our downtown is clean, it looks good, and the really thanks to the work of everybody in the administration, all the members of council, and community leaders and others, we really are moving in the right direction.
I think one of the other things that you had brought up in your discussion was concerning the old Y building and the Discovery Workshop.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we've asked just recently in I think it was a Public Works Committee or Public Safety, we've asked of Mr. Girardi to give us an update on that building. And again, we're hearing, well, it's still in litigation. Mr. Girardi pointed out that he had been informed that there's supposed to be something coming this spring. What I would like to ask the administration to do is, when we say this spring, when spring end and summer begin, I would like the administration, we'd like to ask for some kind of a deadline on when we can be informed of what's going to happen with that building. As we're coming nice weather and you drive up West 4th Street and you look over at that building, it is not really eye-appealing, obviously. And that's our gateway to the historic district. And I know when I bring people in from out of town, business folks, I always want to show them the historic district. And, to drive up there and that's the first thing you see, I just don't think it bodes well. And I'm just hoping that we can set some kind of a deadline that we're informed on what's going to happen with that building. Either it's going to be renovated, and what are the plans to renovate it, and what's the time frame for renovation. I just think it's important to all of us on council that we have some idea where the future of that building is. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
This conversation came up the other day, and that's why I've been in conversation with our solicitor, Mr. Lubin, to see if we could have an executive session with the parking authority and city council to discuss some additional parking. What's really key to that development, and I've had discussions with the developer, and he's looking at doing something that would be a wonderful asset to the downtown. It would add, of course, permit fees, would add some jobs, and it would add, why don't we say, some additional vitality. But what's really key is that parking lot and the ticketing that occurs periodically, and maybe too often. So that's why the plan is, I believe government, our role is not to create jobs, but to try to facilitate jobs, okay, with infrastructure, et cetera. So that issue, Councilman, will be addressed as soon as we have this meeting with the developer, with the parking authority, and with city council. And hopefully, with the response from our solicitor, I can do that ASAP.
President Williamson, not on this issue, but I did just want to, if I could, briefly, to Councilman Smith's point, John Eck, who's the chairman of the Board of Supervisors in Old Lycoming Township, did reach out and wants to, move forward with this MOU. So that is something, on the other issue, just so you knew the name of the person who reached out, Councilman. So he would like it to be, Old Lycoming, the City of Williamsport, and Loyalsock.
Correct.
And because of some of the work that the county is doing to, work towards grant funding, the sooner we can do that, obviously, the better.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
President, do you have anything else?
Mr. Ellis?
Just a quick comment that I like this document because it gives us in one place a look at a lot of projects that we have. They're ongoing already, and they're moving ahead. Future developments within those projects, and I'm glad you pinpointed the upcoming census. Was something we don't think about till it gets.
I actually did. Mr. Grado pinpointed that.
Okay.
I've never.
Famous Mr. Grado.
Yes, it was Mr. Grado. 100% credit on that one.
CDBG bucks. Mr. Grado
yes.
thinks about that one all the time.
So that means you're going to stick around to help us on that issue. But,
He'll be out counting every single person in 2020.
But that is vital to a lot of things we want to do. And just, you read these projects that are underway, and at our Finance Committee meeting the other day, Kim Wheeler from the county was here, and she pointed out that, like the Park Avenue project, the hospital, there's things that can develop there, but some of them are going to take 5-10 years to really come to fruition. So we have to have a vision to work hard now for the benefit of the future, and those are coming. And I think that's a good thing that government can do. And I really believe that's what we're doing, just like we're dealing with the levy. We wouldn't have a levy to deal with had people not had foresight and vision many years ago and built that. So I think have a lot of important things going on, and we're working hard on them. But it's good to see it like this. It makes it easier to keep everything in one place and digest it all. So thank you.
And
No
I'd
problem.
add a thought to that as well, especially on these economic development issues where to really see the fruits of your labor, you're looking at 4 or 5 years minimum at a time, and sometimes 10 or more. I think that's incumbent then on us to be trying to think that far down the road and initiate a new area where we can, especially under this new model of development that we've really focused on here with the partnership between the city and the eastern part of the central business district, the property owners there as well as the college. And again, now we're initiating with in the Park Avenue area with UPMC and the city and the property owners in that area. It's really our initiative to build partnerships and to build communication that launches us on that 5 or 10 or 20-year path. And so what that means is we have to look for new partners to initiate conversations with and build relationships every 2 or 3 years, so that in 5 years or in 10 years, every 5 years down the road, and then every couple of years after that, there's new fruits that can be yielded from that process. So it's sometimes slow and tedious, but it's very much worthwhile, and I think that's a good point, because the people who will follow us in these seats will be able to bear that fruit. So, other comments? Ms. Mealy?
Yeah, I think Ms. Wheeler actually at another point used the phrase decades, Randy. And I think that's the reality, and it can be a hard thing to come to terms with when you're one person, 7 people, and administration, of the present, working on something that won't really bear fruit until sometime in the future, when perhaps you're too old to enjoy it. But it's the more that we can plan for now in the future, the easier it becomes for the future to plan for itself. And I think that sometimes the work feels a little bit, it surprised me when I first got involved with government, the extent to which it feels sometimes like you're treading water. You keep doing things, you keep sending out contacts, you keep brainstorming ideas, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere until a couple of years later you look back and you think, oh, yeah, I see now. we did a little bit, and we've got a lot more to do, and I think for people watching it feels like government moves at the speed of molasses, and I would say in some ways that's a positive thing, and in some ways that means that in the long run things get done right. So at least that's what we hope for when we're working away at things up here.
Absolutely. If there are no other comments, we'll move on to our next item on our agenda, which is kept.
Thank you.
Which finally we get to our next presentation. Thank you, by the way, Mr. Fitzgerald. I appreciate the detail there. Next item on our agenda is another presentation, this time by the Williamsport Bureau of Fire. And Chief Heckman and Dimick, how are you guys this evening? Thank you for your patience.
Very good, thank you. We'll make this short and sweet. Council Williamson, members of council, myself and Assistant Chief Killian are up here tonight to just remind those that maybe weren't there, you thought it was worth mentioning that we were the recipients of the, what's the name of that grant again? It's been so long. Fitness and Foodie grant, I was just playing with him. It's a grant that goes out every year across the country. They picked 2 departments throughout the country, and we were awarded this year. Assistant Chief Killian came up to me last year in 2016, of course, and asked, hey, I'd like to try for a grant. It's at 0 cost to the city. He had a good feeling about it, and I said, let's go. So he wrote the grant, did everything, and next you know, we were awarded it. So I hope in some of the bigger grants we went with this year, he has those same feelings. We'll keep our fingers crossed. We already got some good news on another one. Let's hope it proceeds. But I'll let Mark step up right now, and he'll just give you the nuts and bolts of what went place and all the fun you missed over at Walnut Street Firehouse.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the time. Just wanted to give you a little synopsis on the process. And in doing that, I want you to imagine something real quick to kind of set the stage here. Where we sit here tonight, our resting heart rates are around 60 beats a minute. We're relaxed, we're calm.
Speak for yourself.
Sorry, for the most part.
Yeah.
At a moment's notice, our firefighters, within 60 to 90 seconds of the alarm going off, can put 100 pounds of turnout gear on their backs and have their heart rate elevated to 180 to 200 beats a minute. An increase that is you really can't even compare to professional athletes. And there's a reason why cardiac events kill 50% of the line of duty deaths of firefighters in this country on a yearly basis. And professional firefighters, it's a long proven fact, have an average of a 10-year decreased lifespan over the general population because of the stresses, the physiological impact that the job puts on our body. So as a department, really as the administration and as the 30 line firefighters that work underneath us, we have been at the forefront of firefighter physical fitness for a long time. Excuse me. Early 2000s, the department initiated a physical fitness test, yearly physical fitness test that our personnel were required to complete, and it was punitive. Over the course of time, through some leadership of both those line personnel and the administration, that physical fitness test has evolved into a comprehensive physical fitness program where our firefighters are required to participate in 1 hour of PT every shift, and we have mandatory yearly physicals, and we now perform, instead of a punitive physical fitness test, we perform an age-based physical fitness evaluation. The department has certified personal trainers that we've put through the training that are on staff and that provide leadership to all of our personnel that go through that physical fitness process. So I wanted you to understand really the type of leadership that the department instills, and truthfully, throughout the Commonwealth, we are at the very top when it comes to what we do for firefighter physical fitness and what our personnel do every day.
So with that knowledge in hand, this grant opened up through a company called 555 Fitness. They're a nonprofit organization based out of New Jersey. And their purpose is to push the agenda of firefighter fitness nationwide. The organization is run by firefighters. They're very heavily involved in social media. They put out daily workouts, a substantial number of things. So we applied for the grant based upon what we do every day. Nothing different, nothing out of the ordinary, just what our department does on a daily basis. Received a phone call in November that we were in the running. They wanted some additional pictures of our workout area, sent them that, received another phone call back that we were awarded the grant. This grant has been, 555 Fitness has been awarding grants for the last 3 years, and over the course of those 3 years, they've gotten 600 to 700 applications. But there was something unique about our grant that we didn't know about when we initially applied for it. Another nonprofit organization called Fork and Hose Company, firefighter run. This firefighter, who's a professional firefighter, is also a professional cook. And he won a program called Guy's Grocery Games on the Food Network, if anybody's ever heard of it. Won the firefighter edition. He donated a portion of his winnings to 555 Fitness for a grant that was not only centered around firefighter fitness, but nutrition. So in the process of writing our grant, we didn't realize that this was going to come into play in this grant process, but we were chosen not only for the physical fitness aspect, but for the nutritional aspect as well. And the fact that we have personal trainers on the department, and we have people who care about eating local and eating fresh, and truly not just working out, but taking care, a whole healthy lifestyle. So long story short, we did the grant presentation here in January. We were awarded about $3,000 worth of equipment, much needed equipment. There's a little breakdown list on this on the paperwork here. We got a new physical fitness, a bike, an air assault bike, kettlebells, some brute force training bags, weighted jump ropes. We have a squat rack that will be coming. And the neat thing too is we got kitchen equipment. Because it was the fitness and foodie grant, we actually got some things to help us out in the kitchen too, some cookbooks and some various odds and ends. So it was really, while it's small monetarily, it means a lot to us. And truthfully, I'm incredibly proud of the guys that we have in our department and the commitment level that they have towards being physically fit. All right, our job is to serve the public. If we are not in physical fitness, if we're not in peak physical condition, we simply cannot do that and we fall short. So, we went through the grant process. We were awarded the grant. They gave a great presentation that day. I added some pictures of the daily grant presentation on the back for some, for those of you who couldn't be there. We had a great time. They actually stayed and worked out with the guys on duty that day, worked on some different workout and fitness routines. So all in all, we're very proud as a department and proud of those 30 guys that are out there doing it every day and getting the job done. And we hope you folks are too.
Thank you. And Councilman Henderson is the one that suggested that we make sure that we have this opportunity at a council meeting to have you in, to recognize you and congratulate you on this. I had the opportunity to represent council when you were awarded the grant, and it was really great to understand more about your both nutrition program and your fitness program, and to hear from these guys from 555 Fitness about both the mission of their organization and how, as outsiders, they saw and evaluated and applauded what you had built into the program for the Williamsport Fire Department, and the level of cooperation between administration side and the department on achieving goals together instead of in an adversarial way. For all of us who've been to the fire station, they're proud to show us what they do and what they have. And I always leave a little bit wishing I had more money from this seat to be able to allocate towards what they've initiated on their own, especially there in their fitness area. And so it was really great to see the recognition that they had received through that presentation, and then see the excitement that they had for what some of the new equipment would bring, both in terms of, I suppose, variation in their workout routines, but also very equipment specific to the fitness needs of firefighters. And I learned a little bit about how weak and feeble I am relative to the equipment that they use, and will help strengthen and make them healthier as well. So it was a great morning to be able to learn more about what they do, and applaud your effort in applying for this grant successfully, in addition to the overall department-wide efforts related to nutrition and fitness. So thanks for the invitation, and I was proud to be there. Mr. Henderson.
Yeah, from time to time, the question comes up for us, is it worth it to have a paid professional fire department? I think it is, and I think we have something very, well, we can be very proud of our fire department, and it's something I think we can push our children to say, hey, look at that, maybe someday you can be a firefighter, you know. And there was a time when that was a big push. I think we have a great example for our kids, and so I'm so thankful that you'd come and share that with us tonight, and I look forward to seeing our department grow even more, and I'm thankful for the leadership, and so we appreciate what you're doing. We aren't forgetting about you, and you're doing a very important job. We appreciate every one of them.
Thank you. Mike.
Mr. Novio.
I think this award lends itself to some extent to the comments that Mr. Fitzgerald just made with respect to our city sort of being a bit above other cities of a similar size and scope. I think that comes by way of our leadership within our various departments. We've got some fresh leadership with some fresh ideas and some fresh outcomes, which is always an advantage for us in the long run. So I laud those efforts and thank Mark for sticking his neck out, so to speak, in that sense, to get us a little additional opportunities and some additional help. And I don't know if I can speak for the rest of the Public Safety Committee now, but I'm eagerly awaiting our next luncheon invitation. That's coming up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
I believe I read in the paper in the last couple of days where the Bureau of Fire was awarded awarded a grant from, was that the state?
Oh, that's the yearly state grant, yeah, I believe he's probably referring to.
And that was in the amount of how much?
15,000? Yeah.
15,000?
Yes, yeah, and that's the yearly grant that we submit.
That's the State Fire Commissioner's Office for the state of Pennsylvania, yes.
Well, that certainly helps with purchasing the equipment and so forth.
That's
And,
one we like to count on every year.
and I know that you're very involved in putting these grants together, and we appreciate the time spent in doing those grants. I know in the past it's been somewhat frustrating when you find that other than paid fire departments are receiving quite a bit of money, and it's felt that, well, taxpayers can afford it. And that's not always the case, because when you have a police and fire department and a streets department and recreation department, it's expensive to run and operate a city. So I applaud your efforts in getting any of the grants that you can. And I guess one other comment I'd like to say is really that physical fitness really goes along with the food, because when we've been invited to meetings over there, we always specify that they be at noon. And after we have that lunch that they gave us, we really should be going out and running 2 miles after that, which we don't do. We all go back to our work and then lie down and take a nap. So we appreciate that and appreciate all the work that you do with these grants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, Ms. Mealy?
Just that I'm always delighted to see Williamsport winning culinary culinary awards, be they grants or otherwise, and that I know the fire department does a lot of public outreach, but especially if several firefighters are committed to sort of local farm-to-table stuff, you might consider something at the farmer's market sometime. It's certainly a good place to hit a lot of people and make a good impression for the city's excellent department. So, thank you.
Good point. Mr. Ellis?
Just as somebody whose job has required me several times to interact with the fire department when they're on doing their duty, fighting a fire, when you see them in action, you can really see the physical requirement and why they have to be in shape. And not just for themselves, but they're supporting each other, and they don't want to let each other down. So, basic human instinct is to get as far away from fire as you can, but these people put that down and go into the hazard and put their lives on the line every time they do it. So it's very important. It's not just a nice little thing that they've gotten, and it is nice to get it, but it really is life and death when you get right down to it when they're out there. So kudos, gentlemen.
One last thing that I would add to this is I think it's easily missed, except for us who get the report on a regular basis, it's easily missed that the responsibility of the fire department isn't just the hopefully few fires that we have in the city in a given year. If I remember correctly, and I might have the numbers off, I'm sure you can correct me if I do, it's something on the order of 2,400 calls per year that the firefighters are called out to do. I remember, it's at least five or six separate ones each day. Mm-hmm. And in addition to the physical exertions connected to fire calls, I know many of those calls also require physical fitness to be a part of, and require protecting and helping the public as part of that physical requirement. And so I just wanted to point that out. They are an active department for 32 people in total to be involved with day in and day out, month in and month out, all over the course of the year. So I just wanted to call attention again to that level of activity that sometimes people miss. If there are no other comments or questions, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda then is a resolution authorizing an application to DCED. Mrs. Frank, I think we should probably go short form on this one, please.
Resolution authorizing an application to the PA DCED Municipal Assistance Program for the Park Avenue Neighborhood Revitalization Plan.
Thank you very much. Can I have a motion and a second on this resolution?
Second.
Very much a second. Mr. Grado, how are you this evening?
Very well. Thank you, President Williamson, members of council. We're asking council's permission to submit a grant application to the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development under the Municipal Assistance Program for funds to perform the Park Avenue Neighborhood Revitalization Plan. The funds would be in the amount of $30,000. That's one-third the cost of the total anticipated cost of the project of $90,000. The other source of funds would be the $25,000 that City Council has placed in the general operating budget for 2017. RVT would provide $10,000, and UPMC Susquehanna has agreed to provide another $25,000. As has been mentioned earlier, this Park Avenue neighborhood is similar to the East 3rd Street Gateway Revitalization Plan that was undertaken very successfully east of Market Street. I did provide a revised budget because I think originally we were estimating $100,000 and requesting $40,000. But we have had assistance from Kim Wheeler from the County Planning Office, who also helped us in the process of obtaining the other DCED planning grant. And so with those comments, we did revise the narrative for the budget, as well as the narrative for the grant application. That's due tomorrow. That'll be submitted online if council approves this evening. With the budget narrative, it does show the need for the project and the scope of work, which can be amended somewhat once an MOU is necessary to be executed between the city and UPMC Susquehanna, as we did with Lycoming College under the East 3rd Street grant activity or planning activity. So I know this was reviewed by the Finance Committee, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mealy?
Finance actually reviewed this at great length the other day, a great surprise to all of us. And the potential, of course, for this funding, particularly to be the key to creating a reinvestment strategy for that neighborhood, I think is very clear to all of us. Obviously, the city has already committed $25,000 to the project. UPMC has committed $25,000, and RVT has committed $10,000. But $60,000, as we learned on East 3rd Street, does not go all that far in terms of planning. And I think that the DCED grant will be the will be the key to making this plan a reality and getting sort of all the information that we need to move forward in that neighborhood on grant applications for infrastructure and maybe a little bit of direction for UPMC as well when they look at how to invest in the neighborhood, in their business as well as the neighborhood around them. Let me see here. We discussed a number of different elements, and I guess the primary thing to mention is that while this Park Avenue Neighborhood Revitalization Plan document is what will go to DCED tomorrow, it also becomes the basis for a potential RFP for the planner that we will hire to do the master plan. So this the document is not complete, and we were encouraged kind of heavily by Kim Wheeler from county to review this documentation and make suggestions if we think that it should cover other areas, if we think that it should focus, a little more in this direction or that direction, because in the end, we will resubmit it if we make major modifications to DCED at the same time that we put out the RFP, and that becomes the working plan. That becomes whatever respondents we have for the RFP, what their plan and what they base their proposal on is what we give is based on what we give them. All of that said, I think a few discussions we had about this document in particular, and Ms. Wheeler's suggestion, I think that when we look at that neighborhood, particularly because the hospital is such a big economic driver within the city, we tend to talk about business development and perhaps residential development as a partner to business development. But the area does also host a handful of public spaces that could certainly use a little bit of revisioning as well. And we've already obviously talked at length about particularly the corridor along Little League Boulevard. We've addressed it in our MOU with the hospital, an attempt to sort of make it a friendlier corridor, if you will, eliminate the chain link fencing. But that corridor also encompasses a whole bunch of green space that hasn't seen much attention in a while, and it clearly would bear the city some fruit and would positively benefit both the residents and the businesses in the neighborhood if we were to invest time and money into the public spaces there as well. A handful of other things. The timeline on this project is currently projected to be relatively short. I believe John said that we would likely hear in about a month, perhaps not a final decision, but at least an indication of whether or not we were going to receive the funding.
Yeah, we should hear hopefully by the end of March, and then typically they will send you a grant, if we're successful, they'll send you a grant application or a grant agreement that would be in April. At that time, we expect to have an MOU prepared between the city and the health system. In that MOU would be the funding, and as we did in Lycoming colleges, it gives them the opportunity to work with the RFP to select the consultant. So there's a consultant selection process. There would also be a planning advisory team established, as we did with the East 3rd Street Gateway advisory team. That would go through that same process. So, and that would come before City Council.
So I guess effectively, what this does is it dovetails rather nicely with the timing on the MOU with UPMC, and pretty much we can spend the next month and a half working on ironing out the details of the MOU and the steering committee. Ideally, by the time that we find out whether or not we'll have this funding, we'll be able to put a steering committee in place, know how much money we have to go out for an RFP, and the whole process actually should work out rather nicely. I know at the last time that we worked in this vein on 3rd Street, it took a little longer to bring all the moving pieces together, but ideally in about a month and a half, we can at least begin to put out an RFP, and the consultant selection process can begin. Let me just see here. As we've discussed often already, there are a number of positive things in this neighborhood, and I think this is an excellent first step. And the truly exciting thing here is that because we've already done this and stumbled and recovered a handful of times on the East 3rd Street project, I think we can expect this to move a little more smoothly, and ideally we can, we'll manage to engage the neighborhood and yet perhaps arrive at a final product a little more quickly, which enables us to move on to the next step, which is another whole set of products. But with that, I'll defer to the other members of the committee.
Before I ask for comments or questions, one of the things I thought in your comments that were important to emphasize is so far the organizations engaged in the process, namely the city, RVT, the county, not so much in dollars, but in thought contributions, and of course UPMC, is a limited list. Primarily, it's only been a limited list because those would be the funding partners for the planning process. I think it's important to note from that discussion about how it'll proceed from here is that with the funding plan in place, hopefully including this grant, then the advisory team that will be created will have a much broader base of membership that wouldn't be expected to contribute cash to the planning process, but instead would be just asked to contribute their perspective and their ideas and their hopes and their dreams for the area. And so that advisory team will definitely include a broad base of participants, of course to include city folk and UPMC folk, but would include residents in the neighborhood, would include property owners in the neighborhood, and representatives of nonprofit organizations in the neighborhood. All of those voices are valued and will be key contributors to the planning process. Now that we have in essence, we've taken the first step to plan, of planning to plan for the area, but the actual heart of the planning process will emerge in this 6-week to 2-month period as we begin to reach out and the health system reach out to find the other partners that must have seats at the table so that the actual meat of the planning can proceed. And so I thought it was important to emphasize that in case anybody who might be seeing us take this first public step would think, oh, well, I care about what happens in that area. Why haven't I been asked to participate? You will. It is a matter of securing the funding that we needed so that your ideas can lead somewhere over the next few years, hopefully sooner than decades, but potentially decades. to make that possible. And then the last thing I'd say is I wanted to thank each of the partners that have ponied up their, especially cash, for this project, in particular UPMC, because we've seen this new model start of economic development start to bear fruit in the East 3rd Street Gateway Corridor, in building a partnership between the city and the college and the private property owners in that area. I think having that partnership replicated with UPMC in this area will also bear significant fruit. So comments or questions from members of council? Mr. Allison.
I think you bring up a good point, and there's a section under scope of work that talks about background studies. We need the residents who are there now to be able to have an input. But I think residents who lived there at one time in those neighborhoods that the hospital has taken so that they could expand, those that are still around, it would be valuable to get their perspective as they compile historical data on Park Avenue City neighborhood, the historic pattern, style, special features, and the original urban fabric. It just occurred to me, we have the opportunity to do that. Years ago in the 60s, urban renewal came through at the southern part of downtown and took out whole ethnic neighborhoods. And there's verbal or an oral history of that, but not really a document you go to or, things. And I think we have an opportunity to do that in this area here, at least explore it, I think that it's important to document those things for people, just as we have documentation about the lumber era and pictures and things that people refer to as the history of Williamsport. I mean, this is a part of our history. The people that lived in those neighborhoods, worked there, raised families, were a part of the structures of the city of Williamsport and interacted in so many ways. It was necessary for the hospital to expand, and we lost the physical evidence of that, but I think there's still an opportunity to recover some of the facts that people have and can add to it.
I think that's a great idea. And one of the things that even connecting what both of you have said together is part of the reason the scope of work is subject to revision is once those other voices and perspectives come to the table, they may bring ideas that would require the actual how we go about planning to change as well. So that's a really good point.
Mr. Fitzgerald mentioned that many of the good ideas and projects come from the citizens. So.
Absolutely. Mrs. Katz.
That's, it's really interesting when you bring that up, because how many times do we hear from the Noviellos and other people that we know from the Italian section that was taken away, and you hear the stories, but you don't, they're not the pictures, they're not the facts at times, and the reminiscing that is always done. And there are a lot of people in that area that, and I hear them, they reminisce about what was there. And I think it's vitally important that we don't lose that, because we do talk about our past, okay, and how proud we are of it. And we don't want to lose that. We really don't. One of the things that Kim did emphasize tremendously was to make sure that we work on getting a planner and to get involved in, because we're having such a hard time finding a replacement for John, that it might, as Ms. Mealy said, maybe it'd be easier to look for a planner, because these are projects that are going to keep on growing and growing in the next couple of years, 5-10 years down the line, and we need somebody that's going to be there to be a part of that. I mean, we do have Penn Strategies, which thank goodness we do. They're doing such a fantastic job, but we do need somebody in-house to oversee a lot of these projects because we are part-timers. We can't see a lot of what's going on and be there constantly. So we do have to make sure that the administration does look for a planner.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Ms. Mealy?
Just to follow up, I believe Ms. Wheeler described it as critical that we hire a planner to oversee this project. And actually, we discussed it at length at some length at the finance meeting. And the administration did say that they would try to have a job description put together for us in 2 weeks' time so that we could begin listing that as well.
Well, that's great.
Especially because we should have potentially some extra funds for the planner, given that we may or may not be making an engineering hire quite as soon as we anticipated. And it does seem as though we should get as much personnel on the ground as we can, as early as we can. The other comment I wanted to make is that, of course, the project will have a steering committee, but in addition, the steering committee obviously does involve a bit of a time commitment on the part of the individuals who will serve. I know that as part of the East 3rd Street study, and it's also listed in this document, public meetings obviously form perhaps not a large part, but a substantial part in terms of information gathering for any sort of visioning plan. And so there will be, in addition to steering committee service, there will be ample opportunity for public input at a handful of meetings once this is underway. And I think that that will be an excellent time, perhaps, as Mr. Allison suggests, both to collate stories of the old neighborhood as well as to make suggestions for the recreation of a new one, if you will.
One of the things that, speaking of the planner, you're right, from budgetary standpoint, hiring a public engineer is not an easy process, as we've been told and are seeing. The one bonus of that is every day that we don't is a dollar that we can then spread for other purposes, including being able, council had set aside enough planning dollars to potentially hire somebody with planning credentials sometime mid-year. Maybe we can move that up by a month or two as a result of the process. And I'm sure that given that the county has a much longer history having planners work in their planning department than we do, I'm sure that they would be more than happy to help assist in reviewing the job description because what do they have, 8 certified planners in their department, and so that might be a useful asset that we can call upon in putting that job description and advertisement out if we're able to put that out in, say, April or May, rather than waiting to June or July to do. Other comments on the resolution?
I have
Yep.
one
Mr. Allison?
tangentially related item. I don't know if you got to see the great article about Mr. Grado in the Web Weekly this week, but I'd encourage everyone to read that. Very illuminating, and I'd really like to hear about that cemetery run project.
Yeah, that was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
He kind of caught me by surprise, but that's, I just wanted everybody to know that even though we're looking at a stormwater authority, we did do storm sewers way back in the 80s.
Yeah, that's not,
And then we ripped up a whole neighborhood, and that was a pretty ambitious project.
Yeah.
But you don't get too many flooding complaints in that.
Right.
Park Avenue, where Penn College is, and through the cemetery run. Prior to my coming here, we did the cemetery run pump station, which was not part of the original levee. So Bill Wright he was here even prior to me, and he worked on that pump station. But that, Larry came to me and just wanted to interview me and said because I had so many years of service, so I do appreciate what he did.
Yeah, it was great, yeah.
Thank you.
Well earned, deserved.
Speaking of oral history, John.
Yeah, good point. How many hours do we have with him for that? I mean, all of the compliments that you've been receiving in recent months have been well-earned, but have you had to get larger hats as a result? Your head seems to be
Yeah, I
grown.
can't go away quietly. I'm trying to do that.
All right, if there are no other comments on the resolution for the grant application, Mrs. Frank.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is approved, and we can get that submitted tomorrow. I think the next item on the agenda is accept for filing. We have the Finance Committee meeting minutes of October 25th, 2016, and 11/21/2016. We have Public Works of October 25th, and Veterans Memorial Park minutes of January 9th, 2017. Can I have a motion and a second to approve those for filing?
So move.
Hearing a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and those are accepted. Next item on the agenda is announcements. There'll be 6 people at least, in addition to me, particularly excited about this announcement. There will not be an executive session following this meeting, which might be the first time I've been able to say that in months. But there will be a police pension board meeting immediately following this meeting that hopefully won't take too long. The next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be held on Thursday, March 2nd at 7:30 right here in council chambers. Other upcoming meetings include Monday, that City Hall will be closed for President's Day on Monday, February 20th. On Tuesday, February 21st at 10 a.m. is the Blighted Property meeting. At noon is Planning Commission, and also at noon is the Economic Revitalization Committee meeting, maybe. Pending this.
Mayor-
Question?
Is that going to be?
Actually, I'm going to have to contact you tomorrow.
Okay.
Because we contacted her and we have not received a response.
Okay. All right.
So as of now, it is advertised and
Yeah.
on,
We need it.
but potentially canceled. At 4 p.m. then on the 21st is the Brandon Park Committee Commission and the Shade Tree Commission meeting, and at 6:30 p.m. is HARB. On Wednesday, February 22nd, at 11:30 a.m. is the Redevelopment Authority. On Friday, February 24th, at 10 a.m. is the Fire Pension Board meeting. On Tuesday, February 28th, at noon is Public Works, and at 3:30 is Finance Committee. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Do we have any comments or announcements by members of City Council? Hearing none. Mr. Mayor, you or your administration?
Dr. President, Mr. Vice President, members of City Council, I'm pleased to introduce you to Megan Page. And if you noticed a little bit earlier, Megan came in and was sitting at the table, and she said to me, "Why is there a police officer there?" And I said, "To make sure that you don't leave tonight," okay? But I'm sure that's not going to happen at this time. Megan would like to introduce herself and tell you a little bit more about some of her goals and objectives for the city of Williamsport.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And hello, Council.
It's always awkward the first time, right?
Yes.
We're friendly most of the time.
Well, good. I guess I can start out by telling you a little bit about myself. I am Megan Page, grew up in Williamsport on Walnut Street, actually, and I love the city, and I am excited to work for the city that helped to raise me. And I only hope that I can continue to bring good things to the city.
Well, we welcome you to the city as well, and city government in this case, and very much look forward to working for you and working having your expertise help us work through some of the challenging issues that human resources deals with in this modern age. I know it's been a struggle for us at times, and we look forward to your ideas and your advice, really, on some of the issues that we face. So welcome to city governance.
Thank you.
Any other comments from my colleagues? Ms. Mealy?
On a related note, we understand that you've got a passel of work in front of you here as you get started, and if in any way we can be of any assistance with that, please let us know.
Okay.
And then we'll look to you for help later.
And by the way, some of the, before we were formally introduced here, I was even thinking about you and some of the work that you have ahead in terms of some of those hires. So if there's anything that we can do to help, one, build the relationship so that we can have a good working relationship, of course, but then work on some of those initial tasks that you have in front of you, please let us know.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Anything else, Mayor? All right, thank you. Any comments from the general public? Yep. When you can, please approach the podium and give your name and address for the record.
My name is Frank Steckel. I live at 619 First Ave. And it's nice to be here and see all this stuff going on. But I have a problem with the police, actually with the police chief. There's a gentleman that works at the county courthouse. His name's Ed McCoy. He is he's the chief of adult probation. A while back, I had to go there for a meeting to recover some property. And Mr. McCoy, in my opinion, was completely out of hand. As a matter of fact, I have a copy of the Pennsylvania Code, Crimes and Offenses, of the 4 things that criteria to make a disorderly conduct charge. He's guilty, in my opinion, of 3 of them: using loud language, threatening, making unreasonable noise. It's not just my opinion. Unfortunately, it comes under the auspices of the jurisdiction of the Williamsport Police Department. So eventually, when I couldn't get anything through the county, after I put in a number of right-to-know requests, et cetera, I decided I better contact the police, and Jody Miller, I believe it is, he said he couldn't do anything, so I tried to contact the chief, whom I've never spoken to before. After a week of trying, leaving messages, talking to his secretary, et cetera, and so forth, I went to the mayor's office. I explained to him what was going on. This guy had to be, in my opinion, he had to be investigated, and then allow a judge and jury to decide if it goes that far, and not just the police chief. I did eventually have a conversation with the chief after I talked to the mayor the first time. He called me the next day, and we had a discussion. It wasn't a good discussion, and he basically told me he wasn't going to do anything. Well, I don't think that's what he gets paid $80,000 a year for, whatever. I think he wants to be judge and jury and police, and that's what we call a police state, and that doesn't exist here. So, like what I said, I talked to the mayor, I think it was just yesterday, and he said he would see to it that this would be done. And I wanted to bring it out into the public so everybody knows what's going on. Excuse me. I have in my possession Attorney General Civil Rights Complaint Form. I have a ethics complaint. This describes an ethics complaint. Who does the act cover? Public officials, public employees, candidates, and nominees. Everybody, I think, except maybe teachers, if I read it right. So if you have a problem with a police chief or whomever, you can take it to the state. This is a criminal, disorderly conduct is a criminal, it's probably a misdemeanor, I think. There's different categories. But the thing that makes it important is this guy is one of the chief, he's the head of one of the biggest departments in the county. And I'm getting the impression that, well, we're not going to do anything to him because he's law enforcement. That's not how it works. Maybe I'll remind you of Mr. Geeden, the one-time county coroner who was eventually arrested after 16 years, from what I understand. This is not my opinion, this is what I understand. If I'm wrong, anybody stands, correct me, please. But he was stealing from the dead for 16 years. I had a talk with Sheriff Lusk, more than one talk. He said that he stole from his own uncle, I think, 15 years before he was arrested. This went on forever, and it was constantly being reported, I guess, and nobody was doing anything about it. And to the shame of the county, I mean, he was eventually arrested. But God only knows how many people. It's sort of like the state college thing. The administrators are now being prosecuted because as government employees, they were responsible to react, and they didn't do anything. Spanier, Curley, and some other guy, I don't know his name. They've all been indicted, they're all being prosecuted. And I hate to say it, but if something doesn't move pretty quick with this chief of police, who's a retired 25-year state cop he was a captain, I believe, the same thing might have to happen here. You know, I might have to make complaints about the mayor and the whole council because you're his boss. I don't think that has to go that far. I think the guy should just be convinced that he has to do what he has to do, his job. And and that's an investigation, which the mayor agrees and backed me on. He said he should. As a matter of fact, the mayor said he was going to tell Chief Young, I think it is, that he has to proceed with an investigation and let the judge and jury, whomever, do their job and decide whether it happened or not. Now, so you don't think it's my own opinion of what happened. When I walked out of that room, there were two of us in there, there was myself, Mr. Ed McCoy, who I believe his wife is Judge McCoy, and Mr. Stahl, who I believe his wife is Adrian Stahl, the court administrator. But at any rate, they're supposed to be number one, number two at county adult probation. When I walked out with my computer that I received from them, there were 4 people standing in the hallway, the admittance area. 4 of them, I believe, came out of their cubicles, worked there, and 2 were uniformed sheriff's deputies, who somebody must have called because of the ruckus. Mr. McCoy is 6'3", he weighs like 300 pounds. He's 2 feet from me, screaming at the top of his lungs. All right? There's no excuse for that. Not from somebody in law enforcement. I will not allow that to stand. So if I have to go to the feds, if I have to go to the world court, Mr. McCoy is going to be prosecuted for this. All right? So I suggest somebody nips it in the bud and gets it done. It's a misdemeanor. I think he can live with it. He obviously is out of hand. I can't believe he just decided off the cuff to do something like this. It's probably not an aberration. It's probably I don't know. It's my opinion. I can't say one way or the other. But I can say that there were 2 sheriff's deputies, and when I left with my computer, they weren't looking at me. They were looking at the source of the commotion, which is what they're trained to do. And I'm sure Sheriff Lusk has all that on record. This is a part of an ongoing problem I've had with the county, at the county level. You know, just in passing, just as a mention, you're not allowed to bring a phone into the county courthouse because of Judge Butts' edict, okay? From what I understand, Tioga County, which has their own problems, they live stream every video camera in that courthouse 24/7. You're the only televised body here. The county will not. They're dragging their feet about televising their meetings. So I'm done.
Yeah,
I know, I got time.
Yeah,
But just so you understand, I'm here to put it on the record that I want this to move forward. And I don't expect to wait a week and have to go to the mayor to have a chief of police return a phone call. I am a victim. I expect to be kept, in the loop as much as is possible. Usually victims are, after they make a report, they're questioned, they're asked, So, thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.